Hello, iChurchers. It's Dan Morell here, a Media for Ministry consultant working with the iChurch team, and welcome to another tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at using what's called the Classic Editor. Now, for those of you who have used WordPress in years gone by, you will be very familiar with the Classic Editor, but it's only recently been called the Classic Editor, or more recently anyway, because something new has come along, and that's the Block Editor. In the previous tutorials on editing pages and posts, we have looked primarily at using the block editor, but there has been some reference to the classic editor. And we're going to show you how to use the classic editor and how to actually enable it originally on your site. Because ultimately there are two choices for editing your pages. We have the classic editor or the block editor. There is no right way to do it, and it's whatever is most comfortable for you. So we're just going to show you how to enable the classic editor and use it. So I'm on my iChurch site at the moment, and I'm going to go down to what's called the plugins. Now, we talked in the I think it was the second tutorial about plugins very briefly, and we're going to look at them in more detail in a later tutorial, so don't worry yourselves too much. At the moment, this is just going to be on how to use and activate the classic editor. So when I'm hovering over plugins here, I'm going to click on installed plugins. Now, your iChurch site will probably have quite a few plugins installed and enabled, but the main one we want to look at, ironically, is this one here, the Classic Editor plugin. So I'm going to click Activate here. By default, we won't usually activate this when we hand you your iChurch site, but you're welcome to activate it. So I click Activate here, and you'll see I've got my green success screen of plugin activated. Now, the only difference you'll see now when we visit a page, and I'll just pick any old page, is that when I click on a page to edit it, I'm presented with something quite different from the block editor. It's still all within, you see, this kind of framework of the iChurch interface and the dashboard that you're faced with when you log into your site. Um, but as I say, it's the principles will still be exactly the same. It just looks a little bit different. And so we've got our content here, the main part of the text that we're going to be editing, and we've got all of our formatting options here. We've got our bolds and italics and all those kinds of things that we did talk about in the block editor, and of course you will be familiar with those by using just something as simple as Microsoft Word. We can insert lots of different things. We can insert tables, we can insert lines, we can insert all sorts of things, and our tutorials won't cover the ins and outs of each of these features, but we'd encourage you to have a go, and if you will have watched one of our previous tutorials, then you will be familiar with how to rectify any mistakes you might make so that you'll feel more confident in trying new things. So again, we want to use our principle of two-tab editing. So I'm going to click this link here and right-click it, and open in a new tab so we can do our two-tab editing. Because similarly with the block editor, it looks slightly different. So we'll see on the front end here, the end that the public, the visitors to our site see. After we are a family of, it starts a new line because of the image. On the back end, you'll see it starts a new line straight after what is the United Reformed Church. So we want to use two-tab editing. You'll see that it's more narrow in the back end than it is in the front end, so that's why it's different. So we want to use two-tab editing to ensure that what we want on the front end, we can make those changes on the back end to make it happen. We've still got these are kind of our quick edit options really that we talked about earlier. So we've got the status, which we can change. We've got the visibility, which we can change, and then not forgetting to press update when we've made any of those changes. And then we can make our changes to our website as normal. If we want to add another image, we can click Add Media. If we want to add in something special, we can click in Add Shortcode. We're going to be looking at that in a later tutorial. That's more of an advanced part of editing your iChurch website. And that's kind of it, really. There are lots of other things you can have a look at and do here, but we don't think they're entirely relevant and important to the basics of editing your iChurch site, so they won't be covered in the tutorial. And that is the principle of editing in the classic editor. Again, to disable the classic editor, and if we wanted to use the block editor again, then we would go to Installed Plugins and click Deactivate. It's worth noting that if you have multiple people editing your iChurch site, then although you might log in with a different login, the plugins will still be consistent. So if you have Classic Editor deactivated here, then it will be deactivated for everyone. So just ensure when you're revisiting your iChurch site, if different people use different methods of editing, then you reactivate or deactivate the classic editor as appropriate. And that is the end of this tutorial on using the classic editor. Please tune in for more tutorials sooner. If you have any questions, comments, or you run into any difficulties, then please email the iChurch team, ichurch@urc.org.uk. Bye bye.